There is an attorney in Ohio by the name of Jack Allen Blakesley, I believe, who is now facing an ethics complaint for allegedly defecating into a Pringles can, throwing it into the parking lot of the Haven of Hope Victims Advocacy Center, driving off to court where, lo and behold, opposing counsel was Haven of Hope Victims Advocacy Center, who filed this complaint. And then, interesting note here from above the law, was apparently he's done this 10 times in the past. This is not his first time hurling a Pringles can of feces at opposing counsel.
You've made it to Not Billable, the Lawtrades podcast that brings you bite-sized legal and business news updates, full event replays, and conversations with legal pros about what's going on behind the scenes every week. Stop the clock, put the timesheet down. It's time to get started.
Hey everybody, I'm Warren Pellick with Lawtrades, back with another weekly news update. As always, joined by Matt Margolis. Matt, tell the good people how you doing.
Living the dream, man. We're going to make these into mugs. If you're listening to this, we're going to do it.
These are going to be, that's $1 billion idea. I think these are going to be
Trillion.
mugs. $1 trillion. And we will sell it on the blockchain, of course.
And we'll sell it for $8 a month. That's how we'll do
$8 a mug. It'll be a subscription.
You caught that reference.
Every month you have the mug. It's $8. All right, let's take a look at what we're covering this week. So one of the big news stories of the month is actually not crypto, but Taylor Swift and the fiasco about her ticket sales. But we'll also be covering after that some crypto news, specifically BlockFi. And then we'll be touching on, asking the question if the T14 is even going to be a thing next year. Some of the smaller stories is some IRL shitposting, which is always a fun thing to talk about, and a surprise twist in a $250 million tax evasion scheme. So let's start out with Taylor Swift. She announced earlier this month, after 4 years, she's going to go back on the road in 2023. She's going to put on a tour. Her pre-sale opened up on Ticketmaster shortly thereafter. Within minutes was sold out. Something like 900 stadiums worth of people try to log on and buy tickets. Crashed Ticketmaster system. The secondhand market was selling tickets. I think I saw something for like $34,000 a piece. Insane stuff. And you piss off the Swifties, they're going to come for you. Now we have the DOJ and senators and all these people going after Ticketmaster and Live Nation saying, hey, you guys are a monopoly and this does not work.
It is, well, first off, 100%, right? Most of these tickets are sold through Ticketmaster. Live Nation, I think, is owned by Ticketmaster. I've heard the reports from folks. I've seen it on Twitter where people were stuck in the queue for hours, days, infinity, and beyond, so they could never get their tickets. And now, I love it. You've pissed off a fan base that's so, what's the best way to put it? Rabid. They're listening to this. They're going to come after us next. So I think I'll say this. There's a lot of lawyers that are Swifties. So they
no shade.
They know their rights. I'm sure there's a number of antitrust lawyers that are huge Taylor Swift fans that are like, guys, I know the law on this topic, and we were waiting for this moment to happen, where finally we get to mobilize in the name of Taylor Swift. So the wrong fan base to have this problem, it's very interesting to see, especially in the age where we're looking at antitrust issues, mostly in tech, right? We've talked about this in the past where we've seen the Department of Justice take a much closer look at bigger tech companies, whether it be like app store issues, or advertisement. So it's interesting to see tickets, right?
But this is not like a new thing. You go all the way back to the 90s with Pearl Jam, and Pearl Jam was the first people to say, hey, Ticketmaster is becoming something of a monopoly here. Then when Ticketmaster and Live Nation merged, people were already saying back then, hey, this is going to be a big problem. This is a monopoly, and the DOJ agreed. And they said, we'll approve this merger, but we have a litany of stipulations you need to follow. The problem is, how do you monitor, unless something goes wrong, like with this Taylor Swift situation, how do you monitor kind of like these internal stipulations and what's going on? So it's been a few years. And
Sure. I'm sure there's some sort of, right, like a consent order in place or a settlement agreement of some kind, right? I would assume there's probably a Department of Justice lawyer that's tasked with that, or some sort of manager in place, like legal analysts, that make sure that things are in compliance. There probably are some sort of checks where it's like, every year you certify that this has occurred or this has occurred or you've divested interest in this. That said, to your point, I'm shocked that we haven't seen much more of a fight over the last couple of years. But again, also to your point, like it takes a big event for everyone to finally be like, well, wait a minute. And usually that big event is a merger, not, right? Like in the past, Office Depot and Staples were set to merge together, and that triggered an antitrust issue, which ultimately I think the DOJ said, no, you cannot merge. Here, it's Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift is the trigger for.
But listen, you need, like, it's not going to be some small artist who doesn't have much pull. You need somebody as massive as Taylor Swift or Beyonce or whomever.
Yeah.
If you'll remember, Taylor Swift went after Spotify a few years ago to try to change the game there. And now, her fan base, again, being large enough, might be going after Ticketmaster to change that system.
This episode of this podcast, the slogan here is, if you're going to mess with any fan base, for the love of all that's holy, please do not mess with the Swifties. They will get you. They will take you down. And if you're listening to this as a Swiftie, I'm with you guys. Please do not take us down. I don't know what we did, but please, guys, we know your power.
We stand with the Swifties. All right. Well, before we get into any more hot water with the Swifties, let's quickly move on. The fallout from the massive FTX collapse earlier this month is now being felt in a second collapse. This being BlockFi. Now, BlockFi. So FTX was a crypto exchange, right? Just like the New York Stock Exchange. BlockFi was a crypto lender, right? So they would actually lend you funds in exchange for your tokens. But they were in trouble earlier this year. They got a bailout from FTX. And then once FTX fell, BlockFi was really quickly to follow. And now here we are with another massive, Chapter 11 bankruptcy.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, and the question is, how much further will this contagion go, and will it spread to more traditional banks and investment firms?
That's a fair question. I think it's been coined as such. Oh my gosh, the puns. But I think you've said this last episode as well. We are seeing a crypto winter because of FTX's hand in BlockFi, and I think they also maybe provided funds to other companies that were similar. I think Genesis was potentially having problems, at least at some point. I don't know what their status is.
They still are. They are now trying to raise something like $250 million just to kind of save what's left. But if they go, that's one of the originals, right? They're from 2013 or something like that. That's one of the biggest original institutions.
So you're seeing that. You're seeing this effect where, because FTX, you're right, was playing, I'm not kingmaker, but they were playing stabilizer. They were playing stabilizer. Let's stabilize the market. Let's make sure that the market's still moving. You're right. When you get your tentacles into all of these different corporations, when one falls, the other falls, because you're right. You're my lender, or you're my whatever, my financial institution, or you've been providing me with a revolving line of credit. And once the credit stops, how do I fund payroll? How do I make sure that my liquidity is still at a certain point where I can cover my liabilities? Right. Now, that being said, I think, now this may have just happened like a day or so ago. I think BlockFi is now suing FTX because of this loan. So there's this other wrinkle, which if you're a bankruptcy attorney or I think what do you call it? Almost like a recovery attorney within bankruptcy, you're going to go after FTX, or at least whatever's going to be left, for blood, because you've got to pay off all of these creditors.
Yeah, which, as we talked about last time, it's going to end up being like something like 1 million creditors for FTX.
Sure.
And the jury's still out, so to speak, on how many creditors it's going to be for BlockFi. Another exchange collapsed, I think, yesterday as well, Bitfinance. You have Genesis teetering. And there's rumors that, by the way, that Binance is not the strongest company either. So you have the dominoes are continuing to fall.
Yeah, it's crypto winter again. It's going to be a very cold crypto winter. You will see, obviously, the effect in different financial institutions outside of crypto, because so many people were heavily invested, right? Like Sequoia, I think, is a good example, where Sequoia just had to write down $150 million that they put into, for example, in FTX. There are plenty of other VC funds or private equity or hedge funds that had investments within crypto that are going to have to write off those investments or, explain to their limited partners, hey guys, like we're in trouble. Like we've actually lost X amount of dollars. I even saw someone post on Twitter fairly recently, some group, hey, we had $100 million within FTX. We've recovered some of it, which I'm not even going to get into clawback because, right, we're not going to talk about bankruptcy law just yet here, but that money might have to go back to the bankruptcy. But those folks are like, look, the vast majority of the money that I had within FTX or whatever crypto exchange, it's probably gone. It's probably gone.
Yeah. And a little kind of note here that I found, amusing and in a pretty dark way is that I think in the middle of all this, something like at the end of last week, Fidelity, which is one of the largest investment institutions in the world, I think, just said that we are now going to provide cryptocurrencies as a way to invest your retirement savings, which in the middle of all this was a wild announcement. Yeah, a wild announcement.
Which for them, at least they could say like, hey guys, like we're liquid. We're liquid.
But this gets back to a point that we've talked about so many times here, which is kind of the paradox of regulation. On the one hand, crypto was not regulated, so you have, basically a house of cards of inside dealing and this and that. And when one card goes, the whole system is, as we're watching, collapses. But on the other hand, because it wasn't regulated, it almost protects the wider economy because, big banks that are very, very well regulated couldn't dip their toes into crypto and thus are not seeing the contagion effect here.
I think that's fair. There are some that did have the ability to jump in there, but that's a good example is like venture capital, right? Like venture capital can invest in these crypto coins, these crypto ventures, like whether it be an exchange or it's a special new coin that's coming out or BlockFi, which was a lender. You're right, they were touched, but some other institutions, because you're right, because they would have to disclose those holdings or because investing in it would cause an effect that would maybe, would trigger some sort of SEC inquiry. Didn't do it, which you're right. Definitely, they look back, probably in the beginning, they're like, oh gosh, we could have made X amount of dollars. Now they look back like, wow, we could have lost X amount of dollars.
Right. Wild. All right, well, let's pivot here to a completely different topic. Law school rankings. So traditionally you have the T14, which is the top 14 law schools in the country. Traditionally you have the U.S. News and World Report, which ranks, which is the most, famous example of law school rankings. But I think 2 weeks ago, something like that, in the middle of November, Harvard and Yale Law School said, we're out. We don't want to be part of this U.S. News and World Report ranking system anymore. We don't entirely agree with how they set up the rankings, what they mean, how it affects us, and how we have to structure our law school. I think a day or so after that, the American Bar Association said, and by the way, we're not going to require law schools to use the LSAT or the GRE for new applicants. And then it kind of set off a torrent, and almost the entire T14 pulled out of the ranking system.
Crazy. And I think U.S. Is it U.S. News? U.S. News. We're still doing it. We're still going to rank them. They're like, yeah, don't worry about it.
But so what does it mean now? So what does it mean now?
I think that's a fair point, right? Because it'll probably be like U.S. News will ask for certain bits of information, Yale or Harvard or I think Georgetown stepped out of it or whoever it is going to say, we're not providing you whatever we're going to provide you. We're not going to provide you whatever information. So it's interesting. Selfishly, as a Florida State University College of Law grad, we're going to be number one next. So it's cool to go to a number one law school. But it definitely, on a more serious note, it definitely has an interesting effect on that, plus the LSAT being more an optional thing. If a school ends up making it optional, will definitely have an interesting effect because of that's law, right? Law is about prestige. Like you talk about, I went to the top law school in the T14 and my LSAT was 180. It was a perfect score. I'm the smartest person around. And to see such a fundamental shift will be interesting in an industry that is so heavily reliant upon reliant upon that.
But first of all, there are other ranking systems, right? You have
Sure.
Above the Law, which has its own ranking system.
Shout out to ATL, guys.
but
You're the
there
number
are
one
alternates. But what's interesting, I didn't go to law school, I'm not a lawyer, but what was interesting to me reading about this and kind of gaining insight into this was the reason so many of these T14 schools pulled out is because it blocked them from, I don't want to say pushing the graduates, but what they had to focus on was getting their graduates into private firms, kind of keeping them away from the public domain, even if it, ethically that might be an issue because it helped their rankings, right? So to pull out and
that raises an interesting point. Sorry to cut you off, Warren. This is on the heels of Yale having an issue with judges, where these federal judges are saying that Yale, I think, is too woke or whatever. The Fifth Circuit, I think, has kind of spearheaded this one, and a couple judges were like, "We're not hiring. We will say this now. We're not hiring Yale grads to be law clerks." So I think that plays a part in it as well, where, as maybe they won't say it out loud, but because there's that fear that Yale cannot, put all these students in these prestigious law clerk positions, that may hurt the rankings as well.
Well, listen, I don't think anyone is going to snub their nose now at Yale or Harvard Law just because they're not in this ranking.
Or why not? Florida State University, number one. Shout out, guys.
As a Bruin, I think UCLA was was on its way up there.
Fair point.
All right, well let's turn and look at some of the smaller stories this week. So this one is a wild ride of a story. There is an attorney in Ohio by the name of Jack Allen Blakesley, I believe, who is now facing an ethics complaint for allegedly defecating into a Pringles can, throwing it into the parking lot of the Haven of Hope Victims Advocacy Center, driving off to court where, lo and behold, opposing counsel was Haven of Hope Victims Advocacy Center, who filed this complaint. And then, interesting note here from Above the Law, was apparently he's done this 10 times in the past. This is not his first time hurling a Pringles can of feces at opposing counsel.
Or I'll tell you this, like in Florida, we get from the bar, it'll send you like a list of disciplinary actions against attorneys. And it's usually the same things, right? Like you commingled trust account money, you shouldn't do that. Or it's, it could be something a little bit more nefarious, like fraud or whatever. I have never seen an ethics issue involving someone defecating into a Pringles can. This is there's nothing you can do in this scenario but laugh at how ridiculous. Like when I was in law school, we all take a professional ethics class. I can assure you, my professor never said, "Hey guys, here's a big one for you. This comes up quite a bit. Do not defecate into a can of Pringles and throw them at something."
Completely understandable. My question is Pringles going to respond to this?
Can you imagine? Pringles is like, we have no affiliation with Jack. We do not advise getting into our cans and throwing them.
And does this attorney work for a firm, or is he on his own? Like, what do his partners have to say about this if he works at a larger firm?
Especially if he's done it 10 times in the past.
This is number 11.
Jack.
Yeah, Jack, we need to talk here, buddy.
No, they're like, "Oh, it's just Jack. Hey, it happens."
Unbelievable. Well, I'm very curious to see how that ends, but a wild story. Let's finish off here with I guess the ultimate ending, which is a Texas tax attorney by the name of Carlos Kepke, who back in 2021 was accused of allegedly helping a private equity fund evade some $250 million worth of capital gains taxes. He was set to appear on Monday in front of a federal court in California. Lo and behold, and I'm not saying this isn't true, but the night before he was set to appear, he died.
That's crazy.
So now the federal court is saying we need proof of his death. But it's
that was like my worst fear in private practice, is especially in the plaintiff side. If you're a plaintiff's attorney and you have a client that is seeking recovery, of, like in some action and they die the day before, or they're an executor of an estate and they die. That is a frightening thing. And here, I mean, I think he was an older gentleman who had passed.
Yeah, something in his 80s. So it's not out of the realm of possibility, clearly.
Exactly. Could have been like stress induced or whatever.
Sure.
I'm not going to speculate on this man's passing, but
sure.
I understand the court. The court's like, listen, like, I understand he probably did die, but like, just want to clarify, it is the day he was supposed to testify,
Yeah,
it
for
was
a
kind of a
very
big
major offense. Yeah.
Exactly. That's wow.
So, just kind of the logistics here. Do the charges go to the firm, like, or is this completely wiped if he actually is dead? Like, what happens now?
I don't know. I'm going to be honest with you. I mean, I'm assuming there's probably a number of civil cases probably going on stemming from this. So
Yeah.
in a civil case, like the firm's not off the hook, and I would assume you'd probably go after the estate for whatever money
Right.
is there. I mean, criminally, it's not like, can you imagine it's like you've got a partner and you're like, he died, so you're up next.
Oh my God! Yeah, that's now.
Hey man, like, listen, I know you thought you were scot-free, but that guy's gone, so like we're
That's how
sorry.
it works here. Yeah. Yeah, I assume in the civil case, the IRS is going to go after his estate or the estate of the or the private equity fund or whomever for that $250 million.
Everybody, right?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's-
But in a criminal matter, I mean, that's it.
You do.
It's gone.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. What a wild case.
Yeah. What a crazy coincidence of timing, also.
I know this isn't a story we're forwarding, but I think the viewers out there need to hear this. Today, the Forbes 30 under 30 came out, and I didn't get it. I don't understand. I thought
you didn't-
that
You didn't get
I'm also
we
not
all-
under 30 anymore as well, which just blows my mind. But that's not the point. It's not the point, folks. So, all right, guys.
My
I
sincerest
hope you-
condolences.
So, on that note,
Yeah, on that note, exactly.
thank you everyone for tuning in today. We really appreciate it. Hope you tune
As
in for the
always,
next
yes.
one.
Thank you so
And
much.
if you love it, you hate it, you're indifferent, that's fantastic. Leave us a comment, send us an email, let us know how you feel about it.
Let us know how you feel about the law school rankings. Maybe you went to a T20 school and you want to know what's going on. But
Yeah, listen, if you're a Florida State grad, give me a shout.
all right,
All right,
we'll go
everybody.
Bruins, and I'll see you next time. Thanks again.
See you next time.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Check us out also on LinkedIn and Twitter to keep up to speed with what we're doing. Catch you on the next one.